The morning Xander Everly found a woman hanging laundry on his clothesline was the morning his solitary life began to unravel in ways he could never have imagined. And he stood frozen at the barn door with a bucket of milk in one hand, and his heart suddenly pounding against his ribs like it was trying to escape. He blinked twice, certain the Utah sun was playing tricks on his vision. But no, there she was, real as the mountains that framed his property just outside Park City, her auburn hair catching the light of dawn as she pinned a white cotton sheet to the line he had strung between two posts years ago. The line he had not used in so long that wild morning glories had started to climb up the wooden supports. Xander set the milk bucket down carefully, his weathered hands steady despite the confusion racing through his mind. He was 30 years old, had owned this ranch for 8 years, and in all that time, he had never seen this woman before. Yet something about the way she moved, the efficient grace of her movements as she reached into the wicker basket at her feet, spoke of familiarity. She was not a stranger stumbling onto his property by accident. She knew where she was. He started walking toward her, his boots crunching on the dry earth. It was 1885, late summer, and the grass had turned golden under the relentless sun. The woman must have heard him approaching because she turned, and when their eyes met, Xander felt the ground shift beneath him. She was beautiful, but that was not what stopped him in his tracks. It was the recognition in her green eyes, the way her lips parted as if she wanted to speak but could not find the words. She was perhaps 24 or 25, wearing a simple blue calico dress that had seen better days, her sleeves rolled up to reveal slender forearms. "I am sorry," she said finally, her voice soft but clear. "I should have asked permission, but the door was open and I needed to wash these things and I saw the line and I just thought." She stopped, pressing her lips together as color rose in her cheeks. "I am making excuses. This is your property, I had no right." Xander found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. "Who are you?" The woman looked down at the sheet in her hands, then back up at him. "My name is Clara Emerson. I used to live here, a long time ago." The name hit him like a physical blow. Emerson. He knew that name. He bought this ranch from a man named Thomas Emerson 8 years ago, bought it when the man was desperate to sell, when some tragedy had driven him to leave Utah and head back east. Xander had never asked too many questions. He had wanted the land, wanted the sturdy house and the good water source, and Thomas Emerson had wanted to be rid of it all as quickly as possible. "Thomas Emerson," Xander said slowly. "He was your father?" Clara nodded, her grip tightening on the damp sheet. "Yes, I grew up here. Until I was 17. Then my mother died and my father could not bear to stay. He took me to St. Louis to live with my aunt." She paused, looking around the property with an expression that was equal parts longing and pain. "I have wanted to come back every day since we left." Xander studied her, trying to reconcile this information with the woman standing before him. "Your father sold me this place, signed all the papers. It is mine now." "I know," Clara said quickly. "I am not here to claim it or anything like that. I just wanted to see it again. I have been traveling for 3 weeks to get here. I arrived in Park City last night and slept at the boarding house on Main Street, but I woke up before dawn and could not wait any longer. I walked out here, and when I saw the house, saw the barn and the mountains behind it all exactly as I remembered, I just—" Her voice broke, and she took a steadying breath. "I broke down crying right there in the road. Then I saw how dusty I had gotten from the journey, and I thought I would just wash a few things before I went to introduce myself properly, and I saw the line, and it felt like coming home." The raw honesty in her words disarmed him completely. Xander was not a man given to easy emotion. He had lost his own parents young, had worked hard for everything he owned, and had learned to keep his feelings locked away where they could not hurt him. But something about Clara standing there with tears glistening in her eyes, holding a sheet she had washed in his basin with water from his well, made his chest ache with a feeling he could not quite name. "You can finish your laundry," he said after a moment. "Then come inside. I will make coffee." Clara's eyes widened. "You do not have to do that. I have already imposed too much." "You came 3 weeks to see this place," Xander said. "Least I can do is offer you coffee." She smiled then, and it transformed her face, erasing the worry lines between her brows and lighting up her features with genuine warmth. "Thank you, Mr. I am sorry. I do not even know your name." "Xander Everly. Most people just call me Everly." "Thank you, Mr. Everly. Xander is fine." He left her to her laundry and went back to retrieve the milk bucket, then carried it into the house. The structure was solid, built by hands that knew their craft. It had 3 rooms downstairs with a kitchen, a sitting area, and a bedroom, plus a loft upstairs that Xander used for storage. He had kept the place clean but sparse, with little decoration beyond the necessities. Now, as he looked around with Clara's impending visit in mind, he saw it through her eyes and realized how empty it must seem. He started a fire in the stove and set the coffee to brew, then busied himself with straightening the few items that were out of place. When Clara knocked softly at the door 10 minutes later, he called for her to enter, and she stepped inside with the caution of someone walking into a dream. "It looks different," she said quietly, her gaze moving over the room. "Smaller somehow, but the bones are the same. My mother's kitchen table is gone. She made bread on that table every Saturday." She walked to the window that looked out over the pasture, and there used to be curtains here. Yellow ones with white flowers. Xander poured 2 cups of coffee and handed one to her. "I am not much for decorating." Clara accepted the cup with a murmured thanks. "It is a good house, strong. My father built it himself with help from neighbors. It took him 2 years, working between planting and harvest seasons." She sipped the coffee, then looked at him over the rim of the cup. "Are you here alone?" "No wife or children, just me," Xander confirmed. "I have 3 horses, 2 dozen cattle, and a temperamental rooster who thinks he runs the place. But no people." "That sounds lonely." "I am used to it." They stood in silence for a moment, drinking their coffee. Outside, the sheets Clara had hung were beginning to flutter in the morning breeze. Xander found himself searching for things to say, which was unusual for him. He was comfortable with silence, had gone days without speaking to another soul. But with Clara in his house, her presence filling the space with something he had not realized was missing, the silence felt different. Weighted with possibility. "Why did you come back?" he asked finally. "After 8 years, why now?" Clara set her cup down on the counter and wrapped her arms around herself. "My father died 6 months ago. Heart gave out one night while he was sleeping. My aunt insent. Louis is elderly and growing frail. I have no siblings, no other family to speak of. I realized I was living a life that belonged to someone else, following a path laid out by duty and expectation rather than desire." She looked at him directly. "I wanted to see home one more time. To stand where my mother stood and remember what it felt like to belong somewhere." The vulnerability in her confession stirred something protective in Xander. "You planning to stay in Park City?" "I do not know," Clara admitted. "I have enough money for a few weeks at the boarding house. I thought I might look for work, see if there is a place for me here. Mrs. Henderson at the boarding house mentioned that the schoolteacher position might be opening up soon." "You are educated." My aunt made sure of it. She believed women should be able to support themselves. "I can read and write and do figures well enough. I helped teach Sunday school back in St. Louis." Clara smiled slightly. "Though I have no formal training, I am probably not qualified. You would be more qualified than most, Xander said. Park City is growing fast with the silver mines, but there are not enough teachers to go around. If you can read and write, that is more than half the children in town can say. They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing more easily as they grew accustomed to each other. Clara told him about her life in St. Louis, about the aunt who had taken her in and taught her to be a proper city lady, about the suitors who had called on her, and the marriage proposals she had refused because none of them felt right. Xander found himself talking more than he had in years, telling her about his own past, about growing up in Wyoming and working ranches across the territory before saving enough to buy his own place. When Clara finally said she should return to town, Xander felt an unexpected reluctance to see her go. "You can come back," he said as he walked her to the door. "To visit, I mean, if you want to see the place again." Clara's face lit up. "Really? You would not mind?" "It is your home too, in a way, or it was. I cannot give it back to you, but I can share it for a while." "That is very kind, Xander." She left, walking down the long dirt road that led to Park City proper, and Xander stood on his porch watching until she disappeared around the bend. Then he went back to his chores, but his mind was elsewhere, replaying every word she had said, every expression that had crossed her face. The next day, Clara returned. She brought fresh bread from the bakery in town as a thank-you gift, and they ate it with butter and honey while sitting on the porch. She asked if she could walk around the property, and Xander found himself accompanying her, seeing his ranch through her eyes as she pointed out where things used to be. The chicken coop her father had built, the garden where her mother had grown vegetables, the tree where she had played as a child, its branches still bearing the remnants of an old rope swing. "You mind if I fix that swing?" Clara asked, touching the frayed rope. "I know it is silly, but I would like to try." Xander found some good rope in the barn, and together they rigged up a new swing. When it was done, Clara sat on it tentatively, then pushed off, her skirts billowing around her as she swung higher. Her laughter rang out across the pasture, pure and unguarded, and Xander felt something crack open in his chest. Over the following days, Clara became a regular presence at the ranch. She would arrive in the morning and stay until afternoon, helping with small tasks, cooking meals, and simply being there. Xander found himself looking forward to her visits with an intensity that both thrilled and frightened him. He had been alone for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to want someone's company. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after their first meeting, Clara arrived looking troubled. She sat on the porch steps and did not speak for several minutes, just stared out at the mountains. "What is wrong?" Xander asked, sitting beside her. "The boarding house is getting expensive," Clara said quietly, "and the schoolteacher position went to someone else, a woman from Denver with a teaching certificate. Mrs. Henderson has been kind, but I can see she needs the room for paying guests. I am going to have to leave Park City soon." The thought of her leaving felt like a punch to the gut. "Go back to St. Louis. I do not know where else to go." Xander was quiet for a moment, gathering his courage. Then he said, "You could stay here." Clara turned to look at him, surprise written across her features. "What?" "The house has plenty of room. You could take the bedroom. I will sleep in the loft. It would save you money and you could help around the ranch." "I am not suggesting anything improper," he added quickly, feeling heat rise in his face. "Just practical arrangement until you figure out what you want to do." Clara stared at him, her green eyes searching his face. "Why would you do that for me? You barely know me." "I know enough," Xander said. "I know you are honest and hardworking. I know this place makes you happy, and I know I like having you here." He forced himself to hold her gaze. "I have been alone a long time, Clara. I forgot what it was like to have someone to talk to share meals with, to hear laughter in the house." If you stay, it would be doing me as much a favor as I am doing you." Tears welled up in Clara's eyes. "Are you certain? People in town will talk. Let them talk, we know the truth of it." Clara bit her lip, considering, then she nodded. "All right. Yes, thank you, Xander, I will stay." She moved in 3 days later, bringing with her a single trunk containing all her worldly possessions. Xander had cleaned the bedroom thoroughly and even bought new curtains from the general store, yellow ones with white flowers, because Clara had mentioned her mother's curtains. When she saw them hanging in the window, she burst into tears and hugged him so tightly he could barely breathe. Living together was an adjustment. They established routines, divided chores, and learned each other's habits. Clara was an early riser who liked to watch the sunrise with a cup of tea. Xander was quieter in the mornings, needing time to wake fully before conversation. She hummed while she worked, old songs her mother had taught her. He was methodical and careful, never rushing through tasks, but they fit together surprisingly well. Clara brought life to the house in ways Xander had not anticipated. She planted flowers in pots by the door. She organized his scattered belongings and mended his worn clothes. She cooked meals that tasted like home, filling the house with the sense of baking bread and simmering stew. In return, Xander made sure she never wanted for anything, bringing back supplies from town, fixing broken things before she even mentioned them, and teaching her to ride so she was not trapped at the ranch when he had to be away. As summer gave way to autumn, Xander realized he was falling in love with her. It was not a sudden revelation but a gradual understanding, like watching the sun rise slowly over the mountains. He loved the way she sang to the chickens when she collected eggs. He loved how she read by lamplight in the evening, her lips moving slightly as she followed the words. He loved her kindness, her quiet strength, and the way she made him feel less alone in the world. But he said nothing, because Clara had never indicated she felt the same way. She was grateful to him, friendly and warm, but there was a line she never crossed. She never touched him unnecessarily or gave him looks that lasted too long. She treated him as a friend and benefactor, and Xander told himself that was enough. It had to be enough. Then came the night of the first frost. Xander was checking the animals one last time before bed when he heard Clara scream. He ran to the house, his heart pounding, and found her standing on a chair in the kitchen, pointing at a corner. "Snake," she gasped. "There is a snake." Xander grabbed a broom and approached cautiously. Sure enough, a small garter snake was coiled in the corner, probably seeking warmth as the temperature dropped. He carefully swept it into a bucket and carried it outside, releasing it far from the house. When he came back inside, Clara was still on the chair, her hands shaking. "I am sorry," she said. "I know it was just a little snake, I just was not expecting it." "You are safe now," Xander said, offering his hand to help her down. Clara took his hand, and as she stepped off the chair, she stumbled slightly. Xander caught her, his arms coming around her to steady her, and suddenly they were standing very close together, her hands pressed against his chest, his arms around her waist. They both froze, caught in the moment. "Xander," Clara whispered, looking up at him. He should have stepped back, should have released her and put proper distance between them, but he could not. He had wanted to hold her for so long that now that she was in his arms, he could not let go. "I am sorry," he said roughly. "I should not. Do not apologize." Clara's hand slid up to his shoulders. "Please do not apologize." "Clara, I cannot do this. You are staying here because you have nowhere else to go. I do not want you to feel obligated or pressured. I do not feel obligated," she interrupted. "I feel," she broke off, her cheeks flushing. "I have felt this way for weeks now, but I did not know I thought you were just being kind." Xander stared at her, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. "Felt what way?" Clara took a shaky breath. Like my heart is too full for my chest. Like every morning I wake up happy because I know I will see you. Like I have finally found the place where I belong, and it is not just this house or this land. It is you, Xander. You are home to me." The words broke something loose inside him, some final restraint he had been clinging to. He bent his head and kissed her, gently at first, then with growing passion as she responded, her fingers threading through his hair. They stood there in the kitchen, holding each other like people who had been lost and finally found their way back to solid ground. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Xander rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said, the words feeling both terrifying and absolutely right. "I have loved you since that first morning when I saw you hanging laundry on the line." "I love you too," Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. "I came back here looking for home, but I found so much more. I found you." They stayed up late that night, talking and kissing and making plans. Xander wanted to marry her properly with a preacher and witnesses. Clara wanted the same. They decided to wait until spring, to give themselves time to court properly, but there was no doubt in either of their minds about the outcome. They had found each other, and they were not letting go. The next morning, Xander rode into Park City and spoke to the preacher. He also stopped by the general store and bought a ring, a simple gold band that took most of his savings but was worth every penny. He proposed that evening on the porch, with the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and Clara said yes with tears streaming down her face. Word spread quickly through Park City that the quiet rancher was getting married. Neighbors they barely knew stopped by to offer congratulations. Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house brought Clara a quilt as an early wedding gift. The blacksmith offered to shoe Xander's horses for free in celebration. The community, which had seemed distant and separate, suddenly wrapped around them with warmth and acceptance. Winter came, and with it, a different kind of intimacy. They were trapped inside by snow for days at a time, and Xander learned every detail of Clara's face, every expression she wore, every tone of her voice. They played cards by the fire, read to each other from books, and talked about everything and nothing. Clara taught him to dance, humming waltzes while they moved around the small sitting area. Xander taught her to whittle, guiding her hands as she learned to shape wood. They were careful to maintain propriety. Clara still slept in the bedroom while Xander took the loft. But the emotional intimacy between them grew deeper with every passing day. They knew each other's fears and hopes, their past hurts and future dreams. By the time spring arrived, melting the snow and revealing the muddy earth beneath, they were more than in love. They were partners, two people who had built something real and lasting through the long winter months. They married on a bright April morning in 1886 in the small church in Park City. Clara wore a dress she had sewn herself, pale blue with white lace at the collar. Xander wore his best suit, brushed clean and pressed with Clara's help. Mrs. Henderson and her husband stood as witnesses, and the preacher spoke words about love and commitment that seemed written specifically for them. When Xander kissed his bride, the small congregation erupted in applause. They walked out of the church into the sunshine, hand in hand, and rode back to the ranch in the wagon Xander had decorated with ribbons. Clara laughed the whole way, her joy infectious and bright. Their wedding night was everything it should be, tender and passionate and utterly theirs. Xander had cleaned the bedroom and filled it with candles, and Clara had brought in flowers from the meadow. They came together with love and care, learning each other in this new way, and Xander felt complete in a way he never had before. Life settled into a new rhythm. Clara was now fully mistress of the house, and she threw herself into the role with enthusiasm. She expanded the garden, planting vegetables and herbs. She convinced Xander to get chickens, not just for eggs but as pets, and she named each one. She made curtains for every window and braided rag rugs for the floors. The house transformed from a bachelor's sparse dwelling into a real home. Xander continued working the ranch, but now he had Clara helping him. She learned to milk the cows and mend fences. She could saddle a horse and ride out to check on the cattle. She was not afraid of hard work, and Xander fell more in love with her every day as he watched her tackle each challenge with determination. They were happy, profoundly and simply happy. Neighbors commented on it, how the quiet rancher seemed to smile more these days, how his wife brought light wherever she went. Children from town would sometimes walk out to the ranch just to visit Clara, who always had cookies and stories for them. A year after their wedding, Clara told Xander she was pregnant. He was in the barn repairing a stall when she came to find him, her face glowing with barely contained excitement. "Xander, I need to tell you something," she said. He set down his tools immediately, hearing the seriousness in her tone. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am more than all right." She took his hands and placed them on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Xander could not process the words. Then understanding crashed over him, bringing with it a wave of emotion so intense he could barely breathe. "A baby? Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be. I have missed my courses twice now, and I have been feeling sick in the mornings. And Xander, I just know, I can feel it." He pulled her into his arms, holding her as carefully as if she were made of glass. "A baby," he repeated, testing the words. "We are going to be parents." "Yes," Clara said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Are you happy?" "Happy." Xander pulled back to look at her face. "Clara, I have never been happier in my entire life. You have given me everything. A home, a family, a reason to wake up every morning with gratitude. I love you so much." They held each other in the barn, surrounded by the comfortable sounds of horses and cattle, and dreamed about the future. They talked about names and where the baby would sleep, and how they would need to build a cradle. Xander's mind was already racing ahead, thinking of all the things he needed to do to prepare. The pregnancy was not easy. Clara suffered from sickness that lasted well beyond the first few months. She had trouble keeping food down and grew tired easily. Xander worried constantly, hovering over her until she gently told him to stop treating her like she was fragile. But he could not help it. The thought of anything happening to her or the baby terrified him. Mrs. Henderson came to stay for a few weeks in the autumn, helping Clara with the housework and offering advice based on her own experiences with childbirth. Other women from town visited regularly, bringing food and supplies and sharing their own stories. Clara was surrounded by support, and it eased some of Xander's worry to know she was not facing this alone. As winter approached, Clara's belly grew round and prominent. She moved more slowly now, and Xander took on more of the household tasks, learning to cook basic meals and do laundry. He did not mind. He would have done anything for her. One cold night in January of 1887, Clara's labor began. Xander sent for the midwife immediately, then paced the sitting room while Mrs. Henderson and the midwife attended to Clara in the bedroom. He could hear her cries of pain, and each one felt like a knife to his heart. He wanted to be with her, to hold her hand and offer comfort, but the midwife had firmly told him to stay out. The labor lasted 14 hours. 14 hours of agony for Clara and helpless terror for Xander. He prayed more in that time than he had in his entire life, bargaining with God and making promises if only Clara and the baby would be all right. Finally, as dawn was breaking over the mountains, he heard a new sound. A baby's cry, thin and sharp. Xander stopped pacing, his heart in his throat. Then Mrs. Henderson emerged from the bedroom, her face tired but smiling. "You have a son," she said. "A healthy baby boy, and Clara is fine. Exhausted, but fine." Xander did not wait for permission. He pushed past Mrs. Henderson and into the bedroom. Clara was propped up against the pillows, her face pale and sweaty but radiant. And in her arms, wrapped in a blanket, was the smallest person Xander had ever seen. "Come meet your son," Clara said softly. Xander approached slowly, almost afraid to breathe. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby. The infant had a shock of dark hair and tiny fists that waved in the air. As Xander watched, the baby opened his eyes, and Xander felt his entire world shift to accommodate this new life. "He is perfect," Xander whispered. "Clara, he is perfect. Would you like to hold him?" Xander nodded, and Clara carefully transferred the baby into his arms. The weight was almost nothing, but the responsibility felt enormous. This tiny person was depending on him. This was his son. "What should we name him?" Clara asked. They had discussed names but never settled on one. Now, holding his son, Xander knew exactly what felt right. "Thomas," he said. "After your father, Thomas Everly." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "You would do that. Your father built this house, this ranch. He gave you life and raised you into the woman I love. It seems right to honor him." "Thomas Everly," Clara repeated. "Yes, that is perfect." The first months of Thomas's life were a blur of sleepless nights and constant worry. The baby cried often, and neither Xander nor Clara knew what they were doing half the time. But they learned together, figuring out what each cry meant and how to soothe their son. Xander discovered he had a talent for calming Thomas, walking him around the house in the middle of the night while singing off-key lullabies. As Thomas grew, so did their confidence as parents. The baby began to smile and laugh, reaching for them with chubby hands. Xander would sit for hours just watching his son, marveling at every small change. Clara bloomed in motherhood, her natural warmth extending to encompass their child with fierce protective love. Life on the ranch continued. The cattle herd grew. The garden flourished. Xander hired a young man from town to help with the heavy work, giving him more time to spend with his family. Clara joined the church ladies' sewing circle and became active in the community. They were building a life, not just for themselves but for their son and any children who might come after. When Thomas was 2 years old, Clara became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier. She did not suffer as much sickness, and she maintained her energy throughout. In the spring of 1889, she gave birth to a daughter they named Grace, after Clara's mother. With 2 young children, the house was full of noise and chaos and love. Thomas was a serious little boy who followed Xander everywhere, wanting to help with every task. Grace was more outgoing, charming everyone she met with her bright smile. Xander and Clara were exhausted most of the time, but they were also happier than they had ever imagined possible. The years passed in a blur of milestones. Thomas's first words, Grace learning to walk, Thomas starting school in Park City, riding into town with Xander every morning, Grace helping Clara in the kitchen, standing on a stool to stir the pot, birthday celebrations and Christmas mornings and Sunday services. The rhythm of ranch life, planting and harvest, birth and death, joy and sorrow, all woven together into something beautiful and meaningful. In 1892, when Thomas was 5 and Grace was 3, Clara surprised Xander by announcing she was pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to twin boys whom they named Samuel and Daniel. The house was suddenly overflowing with children, and Xander had to add another room to accommodate everyone. Raising 4 children on a ranch was hard work. Money was often tight, especially in years when the cattle prices were low or when drought threatened the pastures. But Xander and Clara worked as a team, supporting each other through every challenge. They taught their children the value of hard work and honesty. They read to them every night and made sure they attended school. They raised them to be kind and respectful, to value family above all else. Thomas grew into a tall, quiet boy much like his father, more comfortable with animals than people. Grace was bright and curious, always asking questions and getting into mischief. Samuel and Daniel were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and playing elaborate games only they understood. Xander watched his children grow with a sense of pride and wonder. He remembered being alone, living in silence in this house, and could barely reconcile that memory with the noise and laughter that now filled every corner. Clara had done this. She had come back to her childhood home and brought it back to life, not just for herself but for all of them. One evening in 1895, after the children were in bed, Xander and Clara sat on the porch together as they often did. It was summer, and the air was warm and full of the sounds of crickets. Clara leaned against Xander's shoulder and he wrapped his arm around her. "You ever regret it?" Clara asked quietly. "Taking me in that day? Your life would have been simpler without all of this." Xander turned to look at her, surprised. "Regret? Clara, every good thing in my life started the day you came home. Before you, I was just existing, going through the motions. You gave me a reason to live, not just survive. You and the children are everything to me." "I feel the same way," Clara said. "Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I had not come back to Park City, if I had stayed in St. Louis or gone somewhere else. I might have married someone respectable and lived a perfectly acceptable life. But I would have been miserable because I would have spent every day wondering what I was missing." She looked up at him. "I am so grateful I found the courage to come back. That morning when I started hanging laundry on your line, I was so nervous. I thought you would be angry and send me away." "I thought I was seeing things," Xander admitted. "A beautiful woman appearing out of nowhere, hanging sheets on my line like she belonged there. It felt like a dream." "It was real," Clara said. "It is real. All of this, everything we have built together, it is real and solid and ours." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out. Inside the house, their children slept peacefully. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new moments to cherish. But for now, in this moment, everything was perfect. As the years continued to pass, the ranch prospered. Xander's hard work and Clara's careful management ensured they were never wealthy, but they were comfortable. They could afford to send their children to school and buy them new clothes when needed. They could help neighbors in times of trouble and still have enough for themselves. Thomas, when he turned 18 in 1905, announced he wanted to stay on the ranch and work it with his father. Xander's pride in that moment was immeasurable. His eldest son, choosing to continue the legacy they had built. They worked side by side, and Xander taught Thomas everything he knew about ranching, about the land, about the honest work of building something that would last. Grace surprised everyone by becoming a teacher, the position Clara had once hoped for. She taught at the school in Park City, and children loved her for her patience and creativity. She still lived at home, riding into town each morning and returning each evening with stories about her students. Samuel and Daniel, always a pair, decided they wanted to try their hand at mining. The silver boom had slowed, but there were still opportunities for young men willing to work hard. Xander worried about them, but Clara reminded him that they had raised their sons to be smart and careful. They had to trust them to make their own way. In 1908, on a warm summer day much like the one when they first met, Xander and Clara celebrated their 22nd wedding anniversary. The The children had arranged a party, inviting neighbors and friends from town. The house and yard were full of people, laughter, music. Food covered every available surface, and someone had brought a fiddle. Xander found Clara in the middle of the celebration and pulled her into a dance. She laughed and followed his lead, and they moved together with the ease of long practice. Around them, people smiled and clapped. This was what community looked like. This was what love built. 22 years, Clara said as they danced. Can you believe it? Sometimes it feels like yesterday, Xander replied. Other times I can barely remember what life was like before you. We were so young, Clara said. I was just 24 when I came back here. You were 30. We have lived half our lives together now. And I want to live the rest with you too, every single day until there are no more days left. Clara's eyes shimmered with tears. You still know how to make me cry, Xander Everly. Only the good kind of tears, I hope. Always the good kind. The party went late into the evening. When the last guests had finally left and the children had cleaned up and gone to bed, Xander and Clara found themselves alone on the porch once again. Their porch, worn smooth by years of use, overlooking their land, their home. Do you remember that first morning? Clara asked. When you found me hanging laundry. I remember everything about that morning, Xander said. The way the sun caught your hair. The surprise in your eyes when you turned and saw me. The way my heart started beating faster and did not stop. I was terrified, Clara confessed. I thought you would think I was crazy, trespassing on your property, using your clothesline. But then you offered me coffee and I saw something in your eyes, kindness, loneliness, something that matched what I was feeling. I knew, Xander said. Even then, some part of me knew you were going to change everything. I came home that day, Clara said, not just to the house or the land. To you, to the life we would build together. I came home at last, and you were waiting for me, even though you did not know it. Xander pulled her close, wrapping both arms around her. She fit against him perfectly, the way she always had. 22 years of marriage, 4 children, countless challenges overcome and joys celebrated. And still, holding her felt like the most natural thing in the world. I love you, he said. Today, tomorrow, and every day after that. I love you too, Clara replied. My quiet rancher, my home. They stood together under the stars, 2 people who had found each other against all odds. Around them, the ranch slept peacefully. Their children safe and grown, their cattle healthy in the pastures, their land productive and beautiful. Everything they had worked for, everything they had built, was because they had found each other. The years continued to unfold. Thomas married a young woman from Park City named Elizabeth, and they built a house on the far edge of the property. Soon after, Xander and Clara became grandparents for the first time when Elizabeth gave birth to a daughter. Holding his granddaughter, Xander felt the cycle of life completing itself. He thought of Clara's father, Thomas, who had built this ranch and then lost it to grief. How proud he would have been to know his legacy continued, that his grandson carried his name, and his granddaughter was raising her own children on this land. Grace married one of her fellow teachers, and they moved to Salt Lake City, where her husband had been offered a position at a larger school. Samuel and Daniel, still inseparable, eventually left mining and went into business together, opening a general store in Park City that quickly became successful. All of the children had found their paths, and Xander and Clara watched with pride as they built their own lives. As they grew older, Xander and Clara found their pace slowing. Tasks that had once been easy became more challenging. Thomas took on more of the ranch work, and Xander settled into a role as advisor rather than primary worker. Clara's hands grew stiff with arthritis, making the intricate needlework she loved more difficult. But they adapted, finding new ways to contribute, new activities to enjoy. They took long walks around the property, moving slowly but savoring every moment. They spent hours on the porch, watching their grandchildren play. They read to each other in the evenings, taking turns with books they loved. They held hands constantly, a physical connection that spoke of decades of partnership. In 1920, as they prepared to celebrate their 34th anniversary, Clara fell ill. It started as a cough she could not shake, then developed into pneumonia. The doctor came from town, but there was little he could do beyond making her comfortable. Xander sat by her bedside day and night, holding her hand and refusing to leave. "You have to promise me something," Clara said one evening, her voice weak but clear. "Anything," Xander said immediately. "When I am gone, you have to keep living. Really living, not just existing. You have to spend time with the children and grandchildren. You have to sit on our porch and watch the sunsets. You have to remember that we had something beautiful, and that should make you happy, not sad. Clara, do not talk like that. You are going to get better." "Xander." She squeezed his hand with what little strength she had. "I am 60 years old. I have lived a wonderful life with you. I am not afraid, but I need to know you will be all right." Tears streamed down Xander's face. "I cannot do this without you." "Yes, you can. You are stronger than you think. And I will always be with you in every corner of this house, in every tree and fence post. You cannot get rid of me that easily." She smiled weakly. "I am home, Xander. This land, this house, they are in my bones now. Even after I am gone, I will still be here." Xander bent his head, pressing his forehead against their joined hands. "I love you so much. You are my everything. And you are mine. You gave me a home when I had none. You gave me children and a life full of love. You made every single day better just by being in it. Thank you, Xander, for all of it." Clara died 3 days later, peacefully in her sleep with Xander holding her hand. The funeral was attended by half of Park City. People came from miles around to pay their respects to a woman who had touched so many lives with her kindness and warmth. She was buried on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a headstone that read, "Clara Everly, beloved wife and mother, home at last." The months following Clara's death were the hardest of Xander's life. He had been alone before Clara, but that was different. That was the loneliness of never having had something. This was the aching emptiness of loss, of waking up each morning and reaching for someone who was not there. The house felt too quiet without her humming. The kitchen felt wrong without her cooking. Everything reminded him of her, and every reminder was a fresh stab of pain. But he kept his promise. He did not just exist. He made himself keep living. Thomas and Elizabeth insisted he come for dinner several times a week. Grace visited regularly from Salt Lake City. Samuel and Daniel stopped by the ranch often, bringing their wives and children. The grandchildren surrounded him with noise and energy, demanding his attention and making him laugh despite his grief. Slowly, gradually, the sharp edge of pain dulled into something more bearable. Xander learned to remember Clara with joy rather than only sadness. He would sit on the porch and talk to her, telling her about his day, sharing news about the children and grandchildren. He felt her presence in the whisper of wind through the trees, in the warmth of sunshine on his face, in the solid walls of the house they had shared. He continued to care for the ranch with Thomas's help, though his role was minimal now. Mostly he spent his days in quiet contemplation, reading, whittling, watching the world go by. He was content, or as content as he could be without Clara beside him. He knew he had been blessed. Not everyone found love like theirs. Not everyone got to spend 34 years with their soulmate. One morning in late summer, 3 years after Clara's death, Xander woke early. He was 73 years old now, his body weathered by decades of hard work but still relatively strong. He made coffee, then walked outside to watch the sunrise. As he stood on the porch, his gaze drifted to the clothesline. It was still there, though no one used it much anymore. Elizabeth had a newer line at her house, and Xander certainly did not do much laundry. But it remained, a relic from another time, the post still solid, the line still strung between them. He walked over to it, running his hand along the rope. He remembered the first time he had seen Clara there, hanging sheets in the early morning light, how beautiful she had looked. How completely she had changed his world. How grateful he was that she had come home. "Thank you," he said aloud, his voice carrying across the empty pasture. "Thank you for coming back. Thank you for seeing something worth staying for. Thank you for every day we had together." The breeze picked up, rustling the grass, and Xander smiled. He could almost hear Clara's voice on the wind, telling him she loved him, reminding him to eat properly and not neglect his health, promising him they would be together again someday. He stood there for a long time, remembering. Then he turned and walked back to the house, ready to face another day. Inside, the walls held decades of memories. The kitchen table where they had shared countless meals, the sitting room where they had read to each other, the bedroom where they had loved and laughed and dreamed. This house, built by Clara's father and transformed into a home by Clara herself, stood as a testament to the power of love and family. Xander lived for another 7 years, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and eventually great-grandchildren. He told them stories about Clara, about the ranch's history, about the life they had built together. He made sure they understood that home was not just a place. It was the people you loved and who loved you back. It was the connections you forged and the memories you created. When Xander Everly finally passed away in his sleep at the age of 80, the entire community mourned. He was buried next to Clara on the hill, their headstones side by side, looking out over the ranch they had loved. Thomas and Elizabeth continued to work the land, and their children after them, keeping the Everly Ranch running for generations to come. The house remained standing, solid and strong. The clothesline stayed where it was, a silent witness to the day everything changed. And on quiet mornings when the light hit just right, you could almost see a woman hanging laundry on the line, humming a tune her mother taught her, finally home where she belonged. Years became decades, and the story of Xander and Clara became family legend. Great-grandchildren who had never met them still knew their names, still heard tales of how they found each other against all odds. The ranch prospered, growing and changing with the times, but always maintaining the heart that Xander and Clara had given it. In the main house, now over a century old but carefully maintained, there hung a photograph in the sitting room. It showed a man and a woman standing together on a porch, his arm around her waist, her head tilted toward his shoulder. They were both smiling, their faces creased with age but lit with unmistakable love. Behind them you could just make out a clothesline strung between 2 posts. Beneath the photograph, a small plaque read, "Xander and Clara Everly, he gave her a home, she gave him a life." Together they built a legacy that endures. And it did endure. In the children they raised and the love they modeled, in the land they tended and the community they served. In the simple truth that sometimes, against all odds and expectations, 2 lonely people find each other and create something beautiful that lasts long after they are gone. The ranch stands still today, worked by the 5th generation of Everlys, a testament to what can be built when 2 hearts come together in love and purpose. The mountains still frame the property in the distance. The sun still rises over the eastern pastures, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. And on a certain clothesline, rarely used but never removed, the morning breeze still plays, carrying echoes of laughter and songs from a time when a woman came home at last and found the life she had been searching for all along.